A hidden criminal empire moved 20,000 people across the continent, raked in hundreds of millions of dollars, and hid its darkest secrets right in the Los Angeles neighborhood.
Yeah, it's incredibly dark.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We have an absolutely massive story today, and we're jumping straight into the breaking news that just dropped.
Right.
Federal authorities recently dismantled one of the absolute largest human smuggling rings in U.S. history.
A massive takedown.
Huge. Yeah. The ringleader is a man known by the nickname Turco, and he just pleaded guilty.
Which is a huge development.
It really is. His network charged desperate people up to $18,000 a head.
Wow.
They packed them into stash houses, and they ruthlessly held victims hostage if their families couldn't pay the final bill.
The brutality is just
Terrifying. In one case, they even threatened mother. They told her that her daughter would, quote, come home in a box.
awful.
And this exact same smuggling operation also led to a horrific car crash in Oklahoma. It killed 7 people, including a 4-year-old child.
It's a tragic, incredibly complex situation.
Yeah.
We're looking at a well-oiled machine here. They treated human beings as cargo, just moving them across borders for massive, massive profits.
Absolutely.
And, it didn't happen overnight. This network operated in the shadows for years. They moved an unbelievable number of people right under the radar.
And that's exactly our mission for today's deep dive.
Yep.
So to give you all a clear overview, we're looking at breaking news reports from the Department of Justice and CBS News, but we're also pulling in some wider perspectives today.
We really need to look at the whole picture.
Right. So to understand the political firestorm this has caused, we'll examine an opinion piece from the conservative outlet Red State,
Which has some very strong opinions on this. Very strong. And then to figure out why people risk this journey in the first place, we're digging into a massive data report from REDLAC.
Right, the Regional Protection Group. Exactly. They track migration across Latin America. So our mission is to unpack exactly how these billion-dollar networks operate, explore the intense political debate they spark, and uncover the vicious cycle that drives people into their hands.
It's a lot of ground to cover, but it's essential for you to really grasp what's happening.
Totally.
Because to understand a crisis this huge, you have to look at the money, the politics, and the root causes all at the same time. You can't just pick one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We need to start with the sheer scale of Turco's operation, because the numbers here are mind-boggling.
They really are.
The Department of Justice documents show that between 2019 and July 2024, this single organization smuggled 20,000 people into the United States.
20,000.
20,000. Think about that. That's the population of a small city, entirely moved underground.
Yeah.
And they charge between $15,000 and $18,000 per person.
It's wild.
If you do the basic math on that, you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions.
This wasn't a small-time border crossing. This is a sprawling financial empire.
Yeah.
How do you even physically move that many people without getting caught immediately?
Well, it truly was a multinational corporation, just an illegal one.
Right.
To move a population that size, you need serious, highly coordinated logistics. So let's look at how they actually ran the machine.
Okay.
It worked in 3 distinct phases.
Got it.
First, they had associates down in Guatemala. And these associates acted almost like corporate recruiters.
Like headhunters.
Basically, yeah. They went out into communities, found people who were desperate enough to leave, and they collected those massive upfront fees.
The deposits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes people sold everything they owned just to pay that initial deposit.
So they get the money and the people in Guatemala. Then what? How do they get them north?
Once they had the people and the money, the Guatemalan associates handed the migrants over to Mexican smuggling organizations.
So we're talking about the cartels here.
We are absolutely talking about the cartels. The cartels control the territory, so they moved the people up through Mexico and physically smuggled them across the U.S.-Mexico border.
Just a handoff from one criminal enterprise to another.
Exactly. It's a handoff.
But the operation didn't stop at the border,
Okay.
right? Because that's just phase 2.
Right. Once inside the United States, Turco's network took control again.
Right.
They had entire teams of drivers ready and waiting. They moved people from the border into temporary stash houses.
Wow.
And from there, they scattered them across the entire country. The DOJ lists destinations like New York, Florida, Illinois, Colorado, and Washington, D.C.
That is a massive footprint.
Huge. They had dispatchers, drivers, and stash house operators. And they were all communicating and working together to keep the product, which tragically was human beings moving for a profit.
And we really have to talk about how ruthless this business was. Because when you treat people like cargo, the brutality is just shocking.
It is.
The reports pinpoint a specific stash house located on James M. Wood Boulevard,
In Los Angeles.
right in the Westlake district of Los Angeles. It's just a normal neighborhood. You can walk your dog right past it.
Yeah.
But inside that house, if a migrant's family couldn't scrape together the final smuggling fee, Turco and his crew held them hostage. They locked the doors and kept them inside for months.
And that's where that horrifying threat you mentioned earlier came from.
Yes. A third party failed to pay a woman's final fee, so Turco's crew literally called her mother.
Unbelievable.
And they said the daughter would come home in a box if the cash didn't arrive. They held that woman against her will from May to July of 2024. Can you imagine the sheer terror of that?
The total disregard for human life is staggering. You see it in the psychological torture at the stash houses, and you see it physically out on the roads.
Like the crash.
Harvey, you brought up the Oklahoma crash earlier. In November 2023, one of the organization's drivers, a man named Jose Paxter Oxlage, crashed a vehicle in Elk City, Oklahoma.
And 7 people died.
7 people died in that wreck, including a 4-year-old. The smugglers pack people into vehicles like sardines.
Just cram them in.
Yeah, and they drive recklessly at crazy speeds to avoid law enforcement. When things go wrong, the migrants pay the ultimate price. The drivers treat them as entirely disposable.
It's heartbreaking. And the wild thing is, Turco's group isn't the only one operating like this. I saw another bust mentioned in the reports out of Guatemala.
Oh, Operation Albuquerque.
Yes.
Right. Guatemalan authorities just wrapped up that massive takedown. They arrested 14 people who ran a smuggling group known as Los Moises.
And they used a slightly different tactic, didn't they?
They did. What's interesting here is their adaptability. They made roughly $1.8 million by recruiting people, moving them to Mexico, and then handing out fake Mexican documents.
Fake documents so they could just blend in.
Exactly. With those fake IDs, the migrants could actually board domestic commercial flights from Mexico City to towns right near the U.S. border.
So they just flew right over the Mexican interior.
Flew right over it. And once they landed, guides marched them through the harsh desert into New Mexico. It really shows how flexible these networks are. If one route gets tough, they buy fake documents and use airplanes.
They'll use stash houses, desert guides, whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes to keep the money flowing. And they enforce their contracts with pure violence.
So you have this billion-dollar criminal underworld operating right under our noses, bringing thousands of people across the border and laundering money through our cities.
Right.
Naturally, this creates an absolute firestorm in the political world.
Oh, absolutely.
To understand the political anger this triggers, we have to look at how different sides are reacting. For instance, there's a recent piece in the conservative outlet Red State that really captures the right-wing frustration here.
Yes.
Now, crucial rule for our deep dives. Just to be perfectly clear with you, the listeners, we are simply sharing the arguments presented in the source material.
Right. We are not taking a political side here.
Not at all. We're looking at this opinion piece solely to understand the conservative viewpoint on this crisis. We're just unpacking the arguments presented by the author. But if you want to understand the national debate over border security, you absolutely have to understand this perspective.
That's a great point. We need to look at these arguments objectively to understand the broader national conversation.
Exactly.
The author of the Red State piece takes a very hardline stance, and the language they use is incredibly deliberate.
How so?
For instance, the author insists on using the term illegal alien rather than undocumented immigrant. They make a major point of this distinction.
Right. They argue that the terminology actually matters a lot in how we frame the crime.
Precisely. They argue that calling someone like Turco an undocumented immigrant softens the reality of his actions.
I see.
The author emphasizes that Turco broke the law simply by entering the country in the first place, and then broke it again on a massive scale by running a highly organized smuggling ring. They view the initial border crossing as the foundational crime that enabled everything else.
And the piece is very focused on the policy solutions, right? They argue that the standard practice of deporting criminals like this just doesn't work.
They do. The author argues that if you just send a smuggling boss back to his home country, he'll simply find a way to sneak back into the U.S. and restart his highly profitable business somewhere else.
Just pick up where you left off.
Exactly. The author actually compares him to a jaguar that doesn't change its spots. According to this conservative argument, the only real solution is to lock these smugglers up in U.S. cages for good.
Wait, so they're arguing that American taxpayers should foot the bill to keep them in federal prison?
Yes, and they address that directly. They argue that putting them in federal prison at the taxpayer's expense is actually the better, safer option compared to deportation.
Because it stops the cycle.
Right. To them, the cost of prison is worth it because it permanently stops the smuggler from hurting anyone else or moving thousands of more people across the border. It's viewed as the lesser of two evils.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The article explicitly ties all of this anger and border chaos directly to voting.
Yes, the upcoming election.
It tells the reader that cases like this are exactly why they need to show up at the polls in the 2026 midterms. It uses the story of Turco to push heavily for a hardline border agenda.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can really see the immense political frustration at play.
For sure.
The Red State article reflects a viewpoint shared by many voters who look at a 20,000-person smuggling ring and see a complete systemic failure of border security.
They see a broken system.
Exactly. They see a system that allows dangerous criminals to live in Los Angeles, run stash houses in normal neighborhoods, and operate freely for years. Understanding this specific political anger is key to understanding why border policy is such a massive, decisive issue in national elections.
Okay, so we see the massive scale of the crime, and we see the intense political anger it causes. But we still have a huge missing piece of the puzzle here.
The migrants themselves.
Exactly. What does this all mean for the people actually taking the journey? Why do 20,000 people agree to pay $18,000 and risk their lives in the first place?
Right.
Why do they put themselves in the hands of cartels who might hold them hostage or crash their cars? To answer this, we're looking at the Red Lac report.
And the data there is sobering.
It really paints a terrifying picture of the push factors.
The push factors are the realities on the ground that make people feel they have absolutely no choice but to leave their homes. And the Red Lac data from early 2020 is brutal. Let's look at El Salvador.
Okay.
In the first half of 2020, they averaged 17 homicides a day.
17 murders every single day in a country roughly the size of Massachusetts.
Exactly. The per capita violence was astounding. Meanwhile, in Guatemala, the police reported hundreds of extortion cases every single month.
Extortion from the gangs.
Yes. Small business owners, bus drivers, regular people just trying to feed their families, they're constantly threatened by local gangs for protection money.
Pay up or else.
Right. If they don't pay the gang tax, they get killed. It's that simple.
So you have people living in a state of constant terror. They flee. They manage to pay the smugglers. They survive the journey to the U.S. But many of them get caught at the border and deported back.
And this is where the Red Lac report gets incredibly tragic.
Yes, it talks about why deportation fails to solve the problem for the migrants.
What's fascinating here is the concept of durable solution.
Durable solution.
Right. In the humanitarian world, a durable solution basically means a permanent fix to a displaced person's problem. Usually that means they either return to their home country safely and rebuild their lives, or they integrate successfully into a new host country.
Okay.
The Red Lac report clearly states that for people from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, these durable solutions completely fail.
And they fail because the danger never actually leaves. Right.
That's a huge part of it. When people are deported back to Central America, they aren't returning to a safe haven.
Right.
They're put on a plane and dumped right back into the exact same violent gang territory they tried to escape in the first place. But now their situation is actually much, much worse than before they left.
Because of the debt. This blew my mind when I read the report.
Yeah.
When these people get deported, they still owe the smugglers money.
Massive amounts of money.
They might have taken out high-interest loans from local loan sharks or put their family's small plot of land up as collateral just to pay that initial $15,000 fee to the Guatemala recruiters.
Yeah.
So they land back home in extreme poverty, carrying a crushing debt to violent criminals.
This cycle of return is absolutely brutal. They need to pay off that cartel debt immediately to survive, which means they need a good paying job right away.
But they can't get one.
Yeah. The systemic hurdles they face back home make finding formal work nearly impossible. The Red Lac report explains that many deportees lack basic civil documents.
Like birth certificates or ID cards. Imagine finding out your electric
They might have
bill
lost their
is
ID
secretly
cards on the
funding the
dangerous
government's
journey
massive
north,
spending
or they were
addiction.
confiscated.
So the systems
pretty
back home are
shocking
just
realization
broken.
when you
Right,
actually
the
government
look at the
systems
map.
are often
Right.
too backlogged
Well,
to
imagine
issue
for a
new
second
ones.
that you have a savings
Without
account.
basic civil documents,
And,
you can't open a bank account, you can't
you
access
swore to your
health
family,
care,
hand over
and you
heart,
certainly can't get
that
a
this
formal
money was
legal
strictly
job
for
that pays
fixing a
enough
leaking
to
roof.
clear a
You
$15,000
said,
cartel
if we don't
debt.
fix
And
this
what
roof,
are the local
government's
house is
doing
gonna
to help them.
collapse.
It's an
The
existential
reports
crisis for
say
the
the
House.
state
Exactly. It's the
programs
Save
are
the House
completely
fund.
mismatched.
But then, your
to
car
what
breaks
these people
down.
actually
Spend a
need.
little too much on
They
groceries.
really are.
You've got bills
The
piling
report
up.
notes that
So
some
what do?
governments
You
do try
raid
to
the roof
offer
fund.
reintegration
You take that
programs
money,
for
pay off
people
your credit
stepping off the
cards, and tell your
deportation
family, hey,
flights.
don't worry,
Which
we'll
sounds
fix the
good
roof
on
later.
paper.
On paper,
And in
yes.
this scenario,
But these
the roof
programs
is the
often
planet,
focus on
or at
teaching
least Maryland's
entrepreneurship,
climate goals.
like
And
classes
the
on how
car
to
is a
start your own
massive,
small business.
self-inflicted
Oh, boy.
$1.5
Meanwhile, the deportees
billion
returning mostly have
state
backgrounds in
budget deficit.
agriculture,
A completely avoidable
construction, or
deficit, I
cleaning
might add.
services.
Welcome to the deep
It's
dive.
like offering a drowning
Today
man a
we're
class
exploring
on
a
boat
classic
building,
case
when what
of
he
fiscal
really
sleight
needs
of
is a
hand
life
coming
jacket
out of
right now.
Annapolis.
That's a great way to put
We're
it.
looking at the
You have a
Strategic
farmer
Energy
returning with a
Investment Fund,
massive gang debt,
the SAIF.
and the government offers him
huge
a
pot of money
seminar on
meant
starting
to
a
save
startup.
the environment. But
It
it's
just
turning
doesn't
into
line
a
up with
hidden
their
tax
skills or their
on every
immediate,
single person
desperate need
paying
for
an
cash.
electric bill in Maryland.
Plus,
if they
It
actually
really
try
is.
to
It's
start
become
a
the
small
center of a
business in their old
huge political
neighborhood,
fight. You've
won't the
got a
local
Democratic
gangs just
governor,
immediately
frustrated
target them
environmentalists
for
making some
extortion
very
all over
awkward
again?
compromises,
Precisely. They're back
and
to square
conservative
one, but
critics
with
who
more
are
debt.
rightly
Oh,
calling
wow.
this whole thing a
When
shell
you lay it
game.
out
A
like
shell
that,
game.
you realize the
And
ultimate
when you look
tragedy
at the
here.
documents we
This
have
is a
today,
completely
reports,
vicious
budget
closed
proposals,
loop.
It's a
critiques
trap.
from Senate
The
Republicans,
deportee
it
can't
is
stay
really
safe
hard to unsee it.
because
Our
the
mission
gangs
for this
are
deep dive
everywhere.
is simple.
They can't
Follow the
find
money.
a formal job
Always
because
follow
they
the
have no
money.
ID.
We are going to see
They
how
owe
a fund
thousands of
designed
dollars
to
to
fight
ruthless
climate
smugglers
change is
who know
being used to
exactly
plug
where their
holes in the
families
state
live.
budget.
Right.
They
And we'll
literally
dig
have
into
no
the
choice.
argument that
Returning
this
home
isn't found
safely
money
is
at
impossible.
all. This is
So
essentially
what
a
do?
backdoor
They
tax
scrape
on
together
families.
whatever they can.
Let's get
They
right
contact
into
the
it.
smugglers
The
again,
Strategic
and
Energy
they attempt the
Investment
terrifying
Fund. Sounds
journey
very
north one
official,
more time.
very
They're
important.
trapped.
What does it
The
actually
violence
do?
pushes them out. The
on
deportations
paper,
send them
it is
back,
the
and the
state's
debt forces
green
them to run
piggy
again.
bank.
And the
The
smugglers
SIF
just
is
get
managed
richer.
by the Maryland
Exactly.
Energy
Who profits
Administration.
from this
Its whole
endless
stated
loop?
purpose is to
The
reduce
smuggling
energy bills,
networks.
cut waste,
As long
and
as the
fund
root causes the
renewable
intense
energy.
gang
Like
violence
solar
and the
panels and
extreme
efficiency
poverty in
upgrades.
Central
Exactly.
America remain
But
unsolved,
here is the real aha moment of this
people
story.
will keep trying to flee. Where
Yeah.
does the
And as long
money
as they're
actually
desperate to
come
flee,
from?
groups like
Because they
Turcos
aren't
will
just
be there,
taxing you
waiting in the
directly for
shadows
it.
to charge them
No, and that's why politicians
$18,000 for
absolutely
the
love it. It
privilege
feels
of
free.
risking their lives.
So about 40%
It's a really
comes from
dark
regional
reality.
carbon
Yeah.
auctions.
So let's recap the
But the
journey
big
we took
chunk,
today.
the one growing
We
like
started
crazy,
with the shocking
comes with
news
something
of the
called
bust in Los
alternative
Angeles.
compliance payments.
A single
Or
smuggling
ACPs,
ring,
Which is
moved
just a fancy
20,000
government
people,
term for a
running
fine.
stash
Right.
houses
It's a
on
fine
regular
for
city
failure.
streets,
Let me break it down.
holding people hostage
Maryland law
and raking in
forces
hundreds
utility
of millions
companies
of
to
dollars.
buy a
Yep.
certain amount
Then we
of
looked at
green
the fiery
energy.
political
They have to
debates
prove they're
this
using
sparks,
renewables.
examining
But if
a
they can't find
conservative
that green
viewpoint
energy,
from
or if
red
it's just
state
way
that
too
demands
expensive on the
hardline
market,
prison
which it
sentences
usually is.
for
Yeah, the
smugglers
state
who
gives
mock
them
the
an escape
borders.
hatch.
Right.
The
And
utility
finally,
can
we
just
dug
pay a
into the
fee
red light
directly to
data
the
to
state
understand
instead.
the
That
heartbreaking
fee
loop
is
of
the
violence,
ACP.
missing
And here's the
documents,
kicker.
and crushing debt that
Utilities
keeps
are
these people running
increasingly
and keeps the
just paying
smugglers in
fine
business.
because it's
This
cheaper
raises
than
an
actually
important
buying
question
the
for
green
you, the
energy.
listener.
Wait, so
When you read the daily
climate fund is
headlines
getting
about border
incredibly
security or
rich.
immigration policy or
Precisely
caravan
because
movements,
the
it's
green energy
really
mandates
easy to
are
view it
failing.
as just a
Precisely.
political
It is a
talking point or a
completely
line on a
perverse
map.
incentive.
Very true.
The government
today's
made the
deep
mandate
dive
so
shows us
aggressive
that
and the
it's
market
so
is
much
so
more
distorted
than that.
that power We're companies are just talking writing about a checks to the
highly
state instead of going
organized
green.
multi-million
And the stats on
dollar
this are just
criminal
staggering.
underworld.
They are. It's a massive
In 2022,
industry that
this
thrives
revenue was
purely on
$77
human
million.
desperation.
By
And that leaves us
2025,
with
it
a
jumped
final
to
thought to mull over, something that
$365
really sticks out from the
million.
Department of
Wow.
Justice
From
report.
77
the
million
financial
to
side.
Yes.
365 million
The
in
officials
3
noted
years.
that
So now the
Turco's
state has
organization
this
laundered its
massive
massive
accidental
profits
pot of gold.
through financial
It's supposedly
institutions
for green
right in
projects.
Los Angeles.
But
Right in
remember,
plain
that money
sight.
didn't just
Exactly.
fall out of the
They
sky.
operated their
Utility
stash
companies
houses out of
paid
a
those
regular
fines.
home in a Westlake
And do you
neighborhood.
think those
This
massive
wasn't happening in
corporations
some
just eat
far-off
that
shadow
cost out of the
realm.
goodness of
It was
their
happening in our cities.
Oh, absolutely not.
Using
They
our
pass
banks, on our
every single
streets.
penny
Yeah.
of that
So
on to
you
the
have to
customer.
wonder.
Exactly.
How
It shows
much of
up
our
right on your
everyday
electric
local
bill. So
economy
you,
is
the everyday
unknowingly
ratepayer,
intertwined
are
with the
paying for the
hidden
utilities'
billion-dollar
failure
cash
to
flow
meet a
of
government mandate.
transnational human
The state
smuggling?
collects your money,
It's definitely
drops it
something
in
to
the
think about
safe,
the
and
next time
says,
you walk
look
down
at
a
all this
busy
cash
city
we have
street.
for the climate.
Thanks for joining
Which
us
brings
on
us
Deep
to the
Dive. We'll
raid.
catch you next time.